Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this dev track that we're all enjoying now, how it actually got started. I'm playing Eve, a lot, at least an hour a week. So, and I have a bunch of characters on a bunch of accounts, and it's always bothered me a little bit about some of the things in the client. How I know all the information is there, but it's difficult for me to get it and to aggregate it across my accounts and to use productivity tools like the asset list and stuff like that. It's just there are a lot of things there that maybe just bugged me individually, maybe it doesn't bug anybody else, and it's just stuff that I would really like to see in there. So I just started hacking away, downloaded some web framework and started hacking away, making some web pages, and pulled in some API functions, installed the static data export, and just started hacking away at this. And because when I started looking around the web, I just couldn't find anything that that anybody had done out there using all the tools that we have available for them to create these basic functionality tools that I so desperately needed. And then when I started writing this stuff, then I found out why that was. For example, the in-game browser doesn't provide all the information that you really need to be able to do this, and it doesn't have all the JavaScript functionality that's needed so that you can have a truly embedded web page in the client and stuff like that. So we fixed that so that my demo could work, and hopefully that will benefit you guys as well when you continue developing for the IGB and against the API. And I'm hoping that that this little thing will lead to a better dialogue between us and show our willingness to actually add stuff so that you can make these tools yourself in a much better way. Teach a man to fish and all that. So we're not going to do any more features for you. We're just going to do stuff in the IGB. No. So anyway, that's a little backstory to this entire little drama here. But what we're going to do now is we're going to combine all the stuff that the guys have been talking about. The API and the static data export and the IGB hooks. All these are fundamental building blocks for what I'm trying to achieve here and for extending the client. This is our extremely poor answer to WoW's customizable UI. So you are able, or you should be able to do a lot in the IGB to extend the client and to marry data from other third-party applications and our own API into the client and make it pretty seamless. And one of the goals is that this feels like it belongs in the client. It's a stylistic goal, but it also has to do with responsiveness and the way that you access it through the interface. And pages should load relatively quickly because that's the client. One of the benefits of the client is actually there's very little lag when you're loading stuff like the asset list. And I want to pull in third-party data sources that provide information that are not available from us. And this is basically a couple of weekends of one guy exploring what can be done with this stuff without a lot of knowledge about web frameworks or how to make webs as best practices. So you'll probably see some of that and laugh your little heads off. But anyway, so I made this with Web2Py, and you can do this with whatever framework that you have, of course. But the samples that I have are using Web2Py. We're using a Microsoft SQL Server database, and I only have like very rudimentary account management. So basically, this is not a fully fledged application in any sense of the word. It's just a demo of what I was trying to achieve. You're going to have the full API key for this, of course, because we don't have any sort of customizable API keys, but that would be awesome. And because we have the new IGB functionality in there that's only available on CC, then if you're running this stuff yourselves, then you're going to have to do it against CC. So please don't laugh when you see my code. It's really, really bad. Gummi, our web guy, has been spending some sleepless nights trying to clean it up, but I'm pretty sure it's not very good. So in order to understand what's going on here, you have to know a little bit of SQL. Probably just going through Unnar's lecture yesterday would have been enough. You have to know web development or know how to put the word jQuery into Google. I'm using Python, so if you can't live without curly brackets, then you should probably leave the room. And this is on Microsoft Windows. And as I said, I'm making assumptions that you guys know what I'm talking about if it's been covered in previous talks.
What's Windows?
Okay, so anyway, these are the 8 simple steps to get the sample application that I'll be showing up and running. And if you have a computer up, then you can just do it now. You can download the. Can I use this thing here? You can download the website here, and you can go through all this stuff. And most of the steps are pretty easy for installing the SQL Server Express. There are, a couple of hoops that you have to jump through to set it up and get the database up and running and stuff like that. But it's pretty simple for anybody who has done that sort of thing before. And then you get the static export archive, and there's just a simple wizard in SQL Server that allows you to restore that. And in the sample that I have, that is just my primary database. And keep in mind that this website here is just the Python code and stuff. I've not included any of the SQL tables in there, so you won't be able to run it. So number 8 is a lie. But I will do that pretty soon after the talk. I just ran out of time. So, but you can at least take a look at the code and see if you can find anything there that's of interest to you. And I'm using 32-bit Python so that these extensions work out of the box, and Web2Py source, which allows me to use the extensions. So it's pretty simple to get set up, and I'll give you guys the tables, the table definitions probably in a dev block. But there are no procs or anything in the DB, so it's very, very simple. And you can get all the images from the toolkit as well, and I'm using a few of them. And I also provide you here with a lookup table of jumps. There are some third-party guys out there that have done this themselves and have provided a similar dump or actually an application that calculates jumps for you. But I just working for CCP, I was able to extract it from the client pretty easily, so I just dumped it all into a text file and put it there. So it's a bit of a cheating on my end there. So this is what your application will look like, or what a typical application looks like that runs in the client. Your computer connects both to your server through the IGB and then through the Eve cluster, and the IGB and the client itself possibly connect to the Eve image server, and then your server connects to the Eve API. And can I maybe get a show of hands who thinks this is just completely trivial? Okay. I have to know how big words I can use, so I'll use medium, large. Okay, so the new asset list that I was making, it can search all your characters. It's a completely searchable list from all your characters on all your accounts. I just have it all on the same page. And of course, using the API, you can search inside containers. And since I'm just writing this as a normal web page, then I can do stuff that normal people take for granted, like sort by everything and filter by everything completely freely. Things that we would never ever implement in Eve. And no, I'm just kidding. We will probably. And you have facilities to ignore junk, which is something that's a pet peeve of mine. I have an IBIS in probably 3,000 stations in Eve, and they're driving me nuts when I'm in the normal asset list. And I can include pricing information, which I think is pretty cool. Then I can basically just sort by highest price first when I go my usual rounds every 3 years to collect stuff to sell, so that I can pay for my PvP habit. And then I want to have all the in-game functionality available in the asset list. That was my initial goal, but I quickly found out that was not really feasible. But we got pretty far. And then the settings are stored on the server also, which is another pet peeve of mine with the settings in Eve, something that we are maybe going to fix sometime as well. But right now all the settings are on the client, but it doesn't really matter for the asset list since you don't store any settings there. But for us, then you log in through your web browser and you do some filtering and stuff, and then you log in through your in-game browser, and all the same stuff is there, and it's pretty convenient. But at the same time, API caching is 23 hours. And I tried to convince Unnar to just do it completely real time, but he wouldn't do it for me. Bastard. And I cannot take advantage of the fact that we have a thick client. So in the Eve client, we ship a lot of data with the client. And so we only have to send a very small amount of data from the server to the client in forms of IDs. And the client does all its own lookups. But for us, then, we have a web browser, and we have to live by the web browser mantras. But look at this, guys. It's 80% good stuff. So, look at this animation. And so the asset list, we're gonna use the jump export that I told you about earlier as a static lookup for jumps. It's a really naive way of doing it, and it costs us 1.4 gigabytes, but I'm going to do it anyway. And there's this website called evemarketdata.com that has some pricing information for items. I'll go into that in more detail later. I'm going to put type data, like static type data that's shipped with the client. I'm just going to stuff that into a JavaScript file and deliver that down to the web browser when you first connect. And that's just a 1 megabyte plus bad boy, but it will save us a lot if you're using the website for more than a few requests. And that will allow us to minimize the document size on typical page requests. I copy-pasted some code from Eve and put that into a Python file that has some easy lookups. I didn't really copy-paste it, but it's the same type of code where we can actually look up some of the stuff that Unnar was talking about yesterday, where you can determine the type of an item from its ID, which is very convenient. And I tried to keep the response time and actually generating the page under 100 milliseconds on my machine. But then I put it up on my web server and it was more like 300 milliseconds, so it's not very good. So I'll need to go and optimize that, but there are a lot of avenues for optimization. And there are 3 levels of data that we are dealing with here. That's in-memory data, there's the database, our local database, local storage, and then the Eve API. And inventory type structure reverse engineered to get relevant data. I know all this stuff, so this was not reverse engineering for me, but for you guys, then this is something that you have to do. You have to start digging into the tables inf types and DGM attributes and all that stuff to figure out what is the data that you want. And there's a lot of very, very interesting data in there. And some of the stuff is not represented in the client at all, and it's extremely, extremely fun to dig into. And this is just a proof of concept. So this is not how we code Eve today. The util.py file that I told you about, this is something that I recommend that you do. We do this in Eve. We have a big const file with thousands of dogma attributes and types and groups, etc. And then we can always reference these in code, because a lot of the things that we're doing when we are joining actually a type with a type name, etc., we are doing that in code rather than in the database. And it's extremely convenient to have all this stuff in constants. So the IGB request headers. Guys, you who are familiar with the IGB, this is probably simple stuff for you. But in Web2Py, then the request headers are stored in request env, and if it starts with http_eve, and I must warn you, this is illegal request header stuff, then I can just return it directly, and if it has an ID in it, I just cast it to int. So this is awesome. Again, this is like extremely naive, but it works for our purposes, for what I'm doing here. And then for debugging, I can dump everything out to a console. Log info is just print in my example. So then you can just call it directly with the attribute of the instantiated class, and you get a none if it's not there, so you don't get a exception. And this is these are the request headers that we are shipping as of next patch, and it's on CC now. And you can see, if you are familiar with the request headers that we already provide on TQ, that we've made it make a little bit more sense this time. You used to only have solar system name, and then you had constellation ID and constellation name and something like that, and it was just a random messy heap. But now we have IDs and names for everything. Yeah, but really, you should never ever need to use the name. And you even shouldn't even have to use constellation ID or region ID. It can all be derived from the station ID or the solar system ID, because you have all this information from the static data export, and relying on this stuff from the request headers is something that I would not recommend. I would recommend just getting all the IDs out and then using your own backend to actually get the relevant information from that. And that's what we do in the Eve client. With the old IGB, then actually you didn't have to refresh the web page to get new information from the client in there. But today we do. We send this with request headers up to the server when a page request is made. So what we actually have to do is we have to refresh the web page if we want to provide the website with live data. So if you want to reflect the solar system that you're currently in when you're jumping between systems, etc., then you need to refresh the web page, which will send updated request headers and allow you to update your backend state. But everybody does it. It's the way of the web world, even Facebook. So this is how it works. In your front end, it is on the web page. You have a URL. You call Ajax on that thing every however number of seconds you want to have. Probably 30 seconds is sufficient since of the very convenient session change timer. And then on your backend, you have this function. If the information that you're interested in has changed, this is just an example in my, so the first on the slide, in my actual code, then I'm listening to more than this. Then I can just return a reload. I read that and just reload in the JavaScript. So that's pretty simple, and this is just the way that you do it if you want to have live data. And you can have this same schema much more involved, where you don't just reload the entire page, but you just make another call to get the relevant information, or this guy can just return the information that you want to relate to the client, etc. You can do all sorts of fancy stuff. This is just a very naive way of doing it. For getting market data that I'm using in my examples, then I had to rely on third-party developers. There are a bunch of sites out there. I used evemarketdata.com, and there are others, and some are very reliable, others are not. They depend on people running around New Eden and uploading stuff to websites from their cache folders and stuff like that, because we don't supply this information yet. But this is the way that you can get pricing information, and I would say that you should do this maybe once a week or something like that if you're not interested in like the day-to-day market data. But these sites, I've been told, don't really have that level of granularity anyway. Okay, so this is the call. It's just very simple API call. One important thing here is that if the type is not published, then you should not request the information from the site, so that you're not hammering it with the relevant type IDs. And you might even go further and check whether it has a market group, which is something that I'm not doing in this example, but is something that you might want to do if you're doing a production environment. So I'm getting 200 types at a time, and I'm sleeping for 5 seconds to allow them to get a little bit of a breather. And here's the actual call, where I'm calling this API here, just opening it with earthlib2. And this is just a text file. He has other ways of getting it as well, but this is just convenient. I just split it by line breaks and just stuff it all into my database, where I can then read it. And talking to the Eve API is a very similar proposition, like the guys have gone through. You pass it with the mini-DOM, and then you just traverse the tree. And I'm doing all this stuff just extremely naively, just in order to get the information that I need for my sample. But there are a lot of third-party libraries out there that are doing this much better. And you can see here a hint at the 3 levels of data, or actually 1 and 3, where I start by checking whether I have it in my local RAM. And if I can't find it there, then this lambda gets called to get API data, gets the DOM, and stuffs it then all up into memory in this cache RAM call in Web2Py. And whatever framework you're using, I'm sure you have a way to cache stuff in memory like this, and I would highly recommend it because of this. So looking up in memory, there's just a sample I made on my computer. Looking it up in memory is 1,500 times faster than going to the API. So if there's a name or something that you're looking up, then you first want to check in the memory. If you can't find it there, you go to your local database, and if you can't find it there, you go to the API. The API should always be your last bet, and you should always cache on the 2 upper layers, in my opinion. And here is a typical caching strategy that I employ. It's in Python. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So we just do a direct lookup into the self-names dictionary, and if we can't find it there, then we try the database. If we can't find it there, we try the API, and if we find it in the API, we save it to the database, and if we had not found it originally, we save it into memory, and then we return it. So this is a very typical caching strategy that I employ in these examples, and I would urge you guys to do the same. And the asset list is, in my example, is fetched from the user clicking a link. You might want to do this every midnight or whatever, but for my purposes, it's more convenient that when I start to play, I can just retrieve the asset list as it is when I start to play that evening, instead of at some random interval where some cron job is running. And I just take the entire XML document and write it to disk. And then I just start by reading it up from there. And if I can't find it, then I go over to the API. The same caching strategy there. So the asset list uses types extensively. And types are luckily very, very static. So even though you should not ever ask the API for questions about static data, because we collect your user IDs and we send you angry emails every now and then. No, we don't. But you shouldn't do it. So what I do is I just prime all the types with a bunch of metadata into memory, because I know I'm going to be looking it up quite a bit. So there's no reason for me to be doing it like just in time or anything like that. I just cache it all into memory, and it simplifies the model quite a bit. And then, like I told you before, then I'm doing a similar thing through just a static JavaScript file that I generate every now and then, and to allow the client a similar lookup strategy. And here you can see how I'm actually priming the data. It's just a huge SQL statement, which is similar to something that Unnar showed you yesterday, where I'm getting base type data, and I'm getting the group information and the category information, and the price, tech level, meta group, and whatever else you want to put in there, it's fine. You do this on startup, takes a couple of seconds, and then it's primed. It's a very, very good way to read the types, and very, very fun to actually figure out all the stuff that you can know about a type. And as I said in JavaScript, then this is very important if you're using a lot of static data, is to allow the client to look it up locally as much as you can. And I'm not doing enough of this in my samples. I'm sure I could reduce the document size by 20–30% by doing some more of it. And here you have an example of the static JavaScript file. We have the groups, we have the meta names, we have the types, and then we just have a list of stuff that you want the client to be able to look up easily. For player-owned stations, we do have to get them from the API, since they are not providing a static data export, since they are not static data. So every now and then, we have to fetch it from the API and update our local cache. And this is all pretty boilerplate stuff. Once you're done with something like an asset list and have set up this framework and started playing around with it, it's extremely easy to start doing other stuff. And once you really understand how the data is structured and laid out, and how the API works and how the IGB works, adding new functionality is just completely trivial. It's a lot of fun to make new stuff and see your client just get better and better. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have actually been doing this. So I'm going to just mention briefly the research assistant that I also made, because another pet peeve of mine is since I don't have a lot of time to play and I don't really understand the game, then I just have a bunch of characters on a bunch of accounts with a bunch of research agents, and I just run like a research run every year and get myself some data cores and make some money that I consecutively lose then. And since we have all the original functionality, then this just took a few hours to add, and allows you to have a single place where you get all your research for all your characters and all your accounts. And it's very convenient. So I'm going to show you guys a demo that I have here in the client. And it's a bug. Okay. So eveigb.com was not a taken domain, so I just took it. And the first thing this guy does is ask you for trust, and that's just the ccp eve.request trust. So I just trust the website. And one thing you note is that there's no green icon here. So the website has requested trust. We have said, okay, we will trust you. but the page that we are on currently the page request was made without trust. So that's just something to keep in mind when stuff is not really working how you intend, that this might be the reason. So now you can see another page request, and I am trusted. So now I'm logged in, and I named this little bad boy Asset Buddy. And you can see here that I just opted to have it all in a single page. And I wanted it to feel similar to the asset list. You might, if you guys are making an asset list replacement by yourselves, you might say, oh my God, I want it to be completely different because the asset list sucks. But I don't think the asset list sucks myself. I think it has a good use, so I just wanted to augment it. So that's why I made it pretty similar. The group by stations thing has always annoyed me a little bit when I'm doing some of my asset searches. So you love that thing, or? But I made it just an optional thing here, so I can have it if I want to. And this is just some random piece of data that I have in here. So, but now I can ignore stations. Just some Delph stuff, so I can just ignore that. Probably never going there. And this stuff is just stuffed into the database. So now this is just ignored from here on in. And then I might have, a bunch of titanium. Who cares about titanium? So I just ignore that. And I built up my ignore list so that I only have relevant information in my asset list. And when you've been playing for a lot of years, then you have a lot of stuff that you just have no interest in ever seeing ever again. So maybe your own cold corpse somewhere sitting in a hangar. This is not good. And and then I can also start to do a lot of fun things that are not that easy to do in the other asset list. I can filter on whatever I choose. Put in stuff like meta level. So now I'm just seeing Tech 2 stuff, and now I just want to see implants. And so I should probably go try sell this. Could make a lot of money. So it's very easy for me to set up these things, and they're all stored on the server, and we could extend this so that you can save filters and stuff like that. So it's a very, very convenient way to actually take a look at your assets. And then in terms of searching, of course, the search here doesn't allow you to search inside containers, but as everybody knows that uses the API, then the API fixes that problem. So I should be able to search inside some containers here. Probably have to expand them first. Or maybe I don't have any missile launchers in my ship, or maybe this is buggy. So here you see my ships with missile launchers inside them, and I can search inside this stuff. And then when we get down to actually hooking it into the IGP, all this is stuff that you can just do through Firefox. What I really wanted to do was to allow you to right-click an item in the asset list, right-click an item here, and to be able to do the same things. And yeah, I forgot to mention, of course, you have the pricing information here. This is very convenient. And the number of jumps. You can only sort one direction. But this is all very convenient. So anyway, right-clicking an item in the asset list and the new Uber asset list, as I used to call it, you should have at least the same options as you do in client. That was really what I wanted, especially these GM tools. They're awesome. Highly recommend them. But we didn't have all of those on Tranquility. We added some, and if there is some stuff that you feel is still missing, then we can add that. Just let us know at the roundtable. But since I'm looking at stuff from all my characters at once, then maybe this is not completely relevant since I don't have access to some of this data. And I might want to just filter that when I'm doing these right-click menus, and I'm using right-click menus since that's what the game uses, even though it's completely counterintuitive in web pages. But if I filter by my own character, then now I'm in my own context, the context of the logged in in-game user. And now I can actually make some changes to affect the game through this thing. So I can create a contract that should automatically check this item off for me. I have a lot of stuff in this station. Less here. Yeah. And I can view the market details on the item. And I can pretty much just go down the list of stuff that I can do in the asset list. One thing to note is that in the client, then you get the context in the context-sensitive menu for free, but here you have to do it yourself. So for example, I implemented here view contents, which opens up the in-game contents window. And the reason why this is empty here is because the information is from the live API. It's on TQ, some of the information, and this is on the test server. And I have to provide this context myself. So here I didn't, so I can actually view contents of my missile and stuff like that. So you have to be very careful of how you actually structure the data so that you can actually get this relevant information into the browser in order to not just have a lot of irrelevant menu entries here. And then you can, of course, set destination directly to stuff, and it feeds into your autopilot. And that's basically the asset list as such. There's probably not more that I want to show you guys here, but I can show you the research assistant stuff that I did as well. It's just a very similar page where I just take this research journal here, which is empty on CC, and I just take all my characters from all my accounts and put it all together, add a lot of interesting information that is not available in the research journal, and I think should be. The total worth of the data cost that these guys have accumulated on each research agent allows you to start conversation with the agents, which is bugged right now on CC, and set destination, show info on the data core, and show market details, filter by this specific character, etc., etc. A lot of interesting stuff that you can do, and you can even set all waypoints. So when I'm doing my research run, I just set all the waypoints for me, and then the caveat to this is that I'm not doing it now. You guys could do it since you have the jump table. I'm not optimizing the route, so this is an unoptimized route, which means that in this example, I have to go into the map and click optimize route. But that's easily fixed since you have the jump data. So this is very convenient for me. So this thing almost drives itself. I almost don't have to play Eve at all. This is awesome. Okay, that's it for that. Let's see if I have anything else. So stuff that I'm going to add to this, and when I'm just playing around by myself, I want to have multiple filter sets so that you can actually save your filters by name and then choose between them. This is extremely convenient, and in fact, it's just necessary when you're doing stuff like this. And I want to put the filtering on the column headers rather than have to find an item, right-click on that, and do a filter type, which is very convoluted. And of course, opening up individual containers would be better than having to toggle them all on and off. And I'm cheating by not providing with full disclosure that this guy here has 2,245 items, and depending on, this is very heavy on the client actually, and depending on your computer, etc., then this can be slow to load, and this might actually choke when you're up to like 50,000-60,000 items. So then you have to go and do some other clever stuff where you have paging and stuff like that. But that's all stuff that can be easily added. I mean, it's just a web page with data in it. And then the page size is still too large. I can just show you guys. Might be able to show you guys just. Yeah, I can't show you what it looks like. Of course, I can show you what it looks like. Stupid question. So here you can see how the stuff is added into the page. There's an add item JavaScript call with a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff is repeated, so it's very, very easy to just pull this out and put it into a separate structure and reduce the size quite a bit. And then there are a bunch of performance optimizations that can be done, and I'm not talking about moving it into C, but there's a lot of stuff that can be done smarter on the server, and I just then want to continue and make some more stuff in there. Just if I have a problem with the client, chances are that I can just address it myself, and it's just awesome. It's very invigorating. So the conclusions from this little rant is that it's very easy to develop applications for this stuff. There are a few things that you might stumble on when you first get started, but then you are really, really discovering just what the capabilities are when you go along. There's not a big barrier to entry. I would actually say that developing application for the IGB is probably a lot simpler than playing Eve. And you guys all play Eve, so. And you should, I'm only doing to a very small extent in this because this was not done in a lot of time, but you really should establish a framework, your own working environment framework. That's very, very important to have all the utility classes set up and stuff like that. A lot of this will happen organically. You will add the functionality just where you need it, etc. And then you should go back and refactor and take some of the stuff into separate modules, because there's a lot of overlap with whatever functionality you're doing. A lot of places where you can actually pull code out and reuse it, and I would heartily recommend that. And we have a very good community, and our developers are always looking at the forums in our IRC, and we can definitely help you guys if you're stumbling in this thing. And we might laugh at you, but we'll help you. And you should definitely join us at the roundtable if you are interested in IGB development, because as we found out just when doing this dev track here, then there is a lot of room for improvement, and we are going to do more changes to the IGB. Of course, we are going to do a full Chromium upgrade which will allow us to use HTML5 and a lot of other niceties. Don't know when that will happen, but there are a lot of cases where it's just easy for us to add new request headers or add new JavaScript functionality, and you should just let us know. And now I'll just open up for questions and comments and ridicule if you guys have any.
One of the points you mentioned as a goal of developing apps for the IGB is to make it look and feel like it's part of the actual Eve client.
It was one of my goals.
Well, yes, one of your goals. It's a good goal to have. I agree with it very much. Is there any plans to expose the client's color scheme information so that we could customize IGB apps to look and feel the same?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's something that we have been discussing. and it's something that we're extremely interested in doing. And I would not be surprised if that's a push that we'll make after we do the Chromium upgrade. Will allow you guys to make it much more involved and possibly even put some sort of limited hooking in as well, so that it can be a much better part of the client. So.
For the moment, I just can say I'm very happy that you actually try to develop a web page for EVE Online, because most of the stuff we have experiencing when we are working with the IGB or when we are working with the API is that we are getting frustrated, and it's actually nice to see that you are getting frustrated as well, and it actually changed something. Yeah. Maybe you start listening to us anyway.
That's unfair. We do listen to you guys, and we're going to be more visible perhaps now because of this third-party development push, but we definitely do listen to you guys, and we are reading almost every single post on the EVE Technology forums.
On the Apocrypha IGB page over at EveDev, they've got an entry there for automatically refreshing on a session change. You can add a header to do the refresh on the interval, which is session, and in Apocrypha it was supposed to automatically refresh when you jump through a gate, Docker station or undock. Does that still work?
No, that was in the old IGB that I was discussing earlier, but in the new one it doesn't work, so you're going to have to refresh it yourself at an interval, and it's not that big of a deal to do it, so I think it's unlikely that we'll add any sort of like auto refreshing capabilities, because the way that you do it now, you have much more control over it yourself. Just the client refreshing the whole web page is just so like 90s, and you doing on a 5-second interval, doing a little check and then doing some clever Ajax stuff to just locally refresh what you need to in the DOM itself. It's a much nicer way to do it. So I think what we have now is just fine.
You can set the interval for refreshing to 20 seconds. Because if you just look on the client, you have always a 20-second session timer. So if you jump through a gate, if you have a session change, if you undock or whatever, it's always 20 seconds until you can do the next section. So you can actually set this to 20 seconds, it will work. It's what I'm doing on .lan with the router tracking, where I'm using exactly this method with the Ajax polling to record a complete route. And it's funny to see that actually people using it and running off with their battleships 70 jumps until they get potted, and have that track visually on the map. That's pretty funny to see.
Yeah, I was actually I mentioned that in the lecture earlier, that the session changes 30 seconds. The reason why I said 5 now is because on my local server I can put it to 5 seconds, and that's awesome.
Dev hacks. Any more questions?
So regarding your other point, then I just put this in real quickly, since I already have the refresh on session change thing, or refresh every 10 seconds or whatever. Then I just put this in real quickly. Just literally this took 10 minutes. Here I just track my character, just moving between systems, change ships, enter station. And I can track this basically if I have the page open, then I just track this for all my characters or all my accounts, collect it all together on a table. And I can even just run on autopilot, if I'm in my obelisk or whatever they're called, and I want to like run for two hours, run a 20 jump run or something like that, then I can just have this thing open. This records your changes, and then you can basically just see where your character is in your BlackBerry when you're just go through the same website, and it literally, there are so many possibilities with this stuff that can just make your life so much easier if you just start to think outside the box a little bit. So.
Any hands?
Okay. Thank you guys for listening.